Director of Sport Development with the Toronto Raptors, and today I'm also doubling as your host for today's Women's Court panel discussion. I have with me three amazing women from the basketball community joining for me for what I hope will be an insightful conversation about girls and women's basketball and some of the issues facing it. So to get me off the screen, let me bring in some of the guests. First up is someone who's been part of our Raptors development community for over 8 years now. She is one of our Raptors community coaches, and she brings our youth camps and clinics to life. She's played basketball throughout her years, including at the University of Acadia and George Brown College. In 2014, she was also selected as the winner of an opportunity to be mentored by then Raptors head coach Dwayne Casey. She currently has a lot of titles. She is the assistant coach and director of sports performance and off-court development for Ryerson's men's university team. She's the director of player development for the women's team at King's Christian Prep and the video coordinator at Canada Basketball for men's high performance. Let me bring in Aprille Deus.
Yeah, and honestly, listening, thanks for having me, first of all, and listening to all of that just makes me seem like someone who has no time for anything else other than basketball, but I'm happy to be here and make time for this.
That's why I appreciate you being here. Writing that out was quite something. So I'm going to bring in our next guest. She also is a former university basketball player. She is now an entrepreneur in the youth basketball community. She graduated from and played basketball at the University of Toronto, winning 2 provincial titles and a silver at the national championship, while also representing Canada at the Maccabee Games. She founded Elite Camps in 1999, which runs basketball programs at all levels, training over 6,000 athletes per year. While running these programs, she also found some time to author multiple books about youth and basketball, and she uses her experience to consult others on how to build and fill their basketball facilities. On top of all of that, she's also previously held positions on the board of directors at the Ontario Basketball Association, including being the president for 6 years. Happy to welcome Stephanie Rudnick. Thanks for joining us, Steph. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm super excited to be here, especially among some amazing women. So yeah, really excited to get started.
Awesome. And definitely not least, we have somebody that I'm hoping is becoming more and more familiar to everyone. She's played internationally for Team Canada, starting with the U16 team in 2011, moving to the senior team in 2013 as their youngest member. She's been a member of the team since, where notably she's won gold at the Pan Am Games, where she was also chosen as the flag bearer for the closing ceremonies, and an appearance at the Olympics in Rio in 2016. She played college basketball at UConn, racking up 2 NCAA championships there before being drafted 10th overall in the 2018 WNBA draft. In her second season, she was voted to the All-Star team as a starter, and if that wasn't enough, she went over to Australia, won 2 championships and an MVP in the WNBL over there. In the upcoming WNBA season, she will be playing with the Phoenix Mercury. Let me bring in Kia Nurse. Hey, Kia, I hope you got some of your resume right. I had to leave a bit out there. We'd be here for the whole day, but nice to have you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. You got it right. You just missed that I love Cheetos. That's what everybody misses, so don't worry.
Perfect. Great. And I've seen her face on a wall outside. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But all right. So before we jump into the specific topics, I gave a bit of your introduction, but I kind of want to hear some more about you. You all played basketball, and then your journeys kind of went in different directions. So I'm curious to hear more about that, more about yourselves. How did you get into basketball? I'll start with you, Steph.
So I started a bit late, actually. I was a very, very tall grade 8, and I had never touched a basketball before. And when I entered into grade 9, I did not know that I was walking into a basketball mecca for a school. So Vaughan Secondary School was where I started my grade 9 year, and literally I had not even held a ball, touched a ball, and everybody seemed to be walking up to me, asking me if I was going to try out for the team. And I couldn't understand why, but looking back, it makes sense. I was 6 feet tall in grade 9, which was back then very, very, very rare. And I was like, no, I'm not. I've never played basketball. And really, maybe by 3 o'clock on my first day, I'm like, fine, if you leave me alone, I'll go try out. And I remember trying out, and I was wearing Keds and biking shorts, and I really like, I walked out of there and I overheard the coaching team go, well, you can't teach height. And that is how I made my first team. And I just, there's horror stories of people coming and just counting how many times I would fall down. I was pretty awful. And luckily enough, that summer of my grade 9 year, I actually tried out for a McCovey team, a junior McCovey team. And the coach took me under his wing and just taught me tons of fundamentals. And, the reality was when I walked into grade 9, I had zero self-esteem. My height was my weakness in my mind. And I had like slumped shoulders. And as soon as I started understanding that I could control my success, because I could see even just with doing form shooting and basic dribbling drills, I could improve at my own rate. That caused my self-esteem to skyrocket. And all of a sudden my height became my biggest strength and my shoulders came back and I started walking tall and proud. And really for me, that was the beginning of the rebuild of my self-esteem, not just on the court, but in my life. So I look at that grade 9 year as, very tough in the way that it was embarrassing, but my comeback in that grade 9 summer was the beginning of the rest of my life. So it was quite a wonderful start.
All right, Aprille, what about you? Give us a bit of your background.
Oh man, I wish I had a better story to follow up with, but I guess I'm the opposite. So I'm about 5'4" and have been so since I don't know when. But I started, and listening to Steph's story just reminds me of the time when I first started playing basketball. And the one thing I couldn't get a grasp on was double dribbling. Every time, just double, pick it up, until a 6'1" guy came over to me and said, "You can't do that." And so ever since then, I guess basketball was just free flowing for me. So I started in the 5th grade, a little bit earlier, and just found myself on really great basketball teams. I was a pass first point guard, speedy. Apparently no one wanted to guard me until I met MLSE out at St. FX. And so that was a tough matchup for me growing up. And she was someone who I looked up to at the time, and still do to this day. And seeing her, she was someone that I wanted to embody a lot of qualities of, someone who was strong, independent, and a go-getter. And so I've modeled my playing and my coaching career that way as well. And I think that's just pretty much it. Like you said earlier, I have a lot of hands and a lot of pots, all for one goal, and that's the NBA. So that's a little bit about me.
I love that. It's nice to hear when we get in later, having the role model. I think that's huge. So that's really cool that played such a role when you were younger. And Kia, what about you?
I was very early into the game. I am from a family of athletes. So when I was born, both of my parents were coaching my sister's basketball team. She's 9 years older than me. And then my brother is 1 year and 2 weeks. So me and him were on the sidelines running around trying to entertain ourselves while mom and dad were coaching. And so my sister, I thought, was like Michael Jordan. Like, I was like, she's so cool and she's so fast. And I loved how good she was. So I was like, I want to be like her. And so at 4, my parents put me in Transway House League, and you get 6-foot nets. Back then, you're called a mini-me. You're like all the little 4-year-olds with you. You close your eyes to shoot. And I, for some reason, quickly progressed to the 10-foot net. And it wasn't like I needed to travel to get it to go in, but I got there. And so from that point on, I fell in love with basketball. And I was with Transway my entire career. My mom was an original Transway member, so it was cool to kind of see that go through all 3 generations. And so from that point, I played Team Ontario for 3 years until I made that national team. And then I moved straight to the national team and have been running through there, Connecticut, for 4 years, time of my life, being able to win national championships and winning streaks and all this crazy stuff. Now that when I think back at it, it's super special. And then WNBA was never really in my dream list of things to do. I wasn't really sure I could get there if I had the talent to do it. And coming out of college and my last year, my coach was like, "So like WNBA," and I was like, "Oh, that's a thing." Yeah. So ended up in that. And, I've been able to travel the world with Team Canada, with playing in Australia as well. And there's so many doors that have opened up for me, just being able to be a part of the basketball community and do a number of different things from, Key Nurse Elite and the AAU program side of things to being able to work on the broadcast side of things. So it's been really fun to have basketball in my life. It's still a huge part of who I am. It's my job. I'm very lucky that every day practice is my job, and people in COVID are now seeing my outfit every day as sweatpants. That's what I go to work in. So people are starting to feel how I feel that way now. But yeah, basketball has just been something I've fallen in love with. I played soccer my entire life too. I stopped in the summer of 9th grade when we started doing Ontario basketball and stuff in the summer as well. So you get stuck picking one or the other. I think I made the right choice. I do miss soccer now and then, but I think it was an okay choice.
I know that choice, actually. It wasn't with basketball, but I was hockey and soccer. And yeah, you get to it, you're like, there's not enough hours in the day as much as you love multiple sports. It's just, you got to choose. That's awesome. So I was saying, I was a soccer player. So I know growing up for me, playing sports, I can point to a million things probably on how it shaped my life. It's my friendships now, it's my life skills. And then I found it interesting. I found a study, it was by the Canadian Women in Sport, and it was talking even beyond that in terms of self-perception and how it helps, like Stephanie mentioned, confidence, self-esteem, that kind of thing. So they asked women who had played a sport how they felt about themselves, how they saw themselves in different categories. And when compared to females that hadn't played a sport, they outperformed them in every single category. So things like how confident they were, happiness, how they perceived themselves as successful or even intelligent. So I thought that was really eye-opening, as much as we know that, but to see it in stats. So I was wondering, from all of your different experiences in sports, what you think about kind of stats like this, or one or two things that you can point to in your mind that stick out as something that has changed your life, that was sport has given to you. So Steph, I know you wrote a book about how basketball can help children succeed in life. So I think we'll start with you and see kind of what your thoughts are on all that.
Yeah, that's one of my absolute favorite topics of all time. It's my business. I really, when people ask me what I do, I don't say I run basketball camps. I say I teach life lessons through sport. And the truth is, the reason I really feel that way is I never went to business school, and everything that I learned to become a successful entrepreneur, I learned through playing my sport. And, when I look back and think about my basketball career, and it's nowhere near as accomplished as Kia over here, but I definitely, when I think back to it, I was not a leader back then. I wasn't team captain, even at U of T, but I was surrounded by amazing women. I was surrounded by great coaches and not great coaches. I was surrounded by amazing teammates and not amazing teammates. As players, we work through adversity. So everything I've learned, and a great example is COVID and all the pivots that we've had to do for our company to survive as an entrepreneur. And, of course, things scare me, but I know from my experience in sport that I can pivot through almost everything, as it's been shown during COVID. So, whether it's dealing with a coach you don't like, I look at an employer that you might not like, whether it's a teammate you don't like on the court, or a fellow employee you don't enjoy working with. Climbing the corporate ladder is the same as working your way off a bench. So every single lesson I've learned in sport has been applicable to my life. So I can't explain how valuable that has been for me in my life. And I know that if I were to look back, or actually look forward as an athlete, I would not have even believed where I would be right now if you would have told me when I was in my first year of university that I could, be an entrepreneur and lead my company to where it is today. So when I look back, the only thing that I can think of is the amazing role models that I had in my sport, and the experiences, mostly the bad ones, to be honest with you, and working my way through failure and injury and, all the adversity that comes with playing sport was my springboard into who I have become now as a leader in my field.
Yeah, I find that so interesting because you keep saying leader, and it was the same study, and they had a stat, and I think it was, they asked female executives how many of them had played a sport, and 94% of them had played a sport. So I was like, that is really telling. And I think they had 74% of them said in some way sport helped their career. So I think that's a perfect example and it lines up exactly to what you're saying. So yeah, I'm wondering what your thoughts are kind of on all that as well.
Well, I agree completely with literally everything. I think the one big thing for me is I have a 9-month-old nephew and another nephew on the way in a couple months. And I talk to my siblings now and I'm like, are they going to play sports? Like when they grow up, it's so different now from, how we grew up and how involved parents are in youth sport now and not. And my mom always says to me, the one thing you have to make sure your kid does, I don't care what your generation says about kids in sports, is make sure they learn how to lose. And it's okay that they learn how to lose, because it's that failure and seeing what it takes to succeed or find your way out of that that's going to make a difference. Like nowadays, a lot of kids, if they're failing, their parents just take them out of the sport, put them somewhere else where they can be the best. Where instead, now you have to find a way to work your way out of it. Like you mentioned, like coming off the bench is one thing. I started when I was 4 and I got to the second grade, I started rep basketball, but I was on the 4th graders team. And at that time, it's fair play. My dad's the coach. I didn't get to play more than the minimal amount of shifts you needed for fair play. It was like 2. So I'm in there just trying to like feel like I want to help, I want to do something, but I had to work my way because there was players who deserved the time more than I did. So learning my way to do that, working out of it. Every time we lost, every time we didn't win a championship, if we didn't come in first, my parents were like, you're the first loser. That's how we grew up. And so we kind of figured out different ways to understand that life, I read a book, everyday life is a problem. There's like 18 different problems you can face every day. Some are good problems, some are bad problems. How are you going to solve them? You're going to lose in a lot of them more than you probably win. I've actually probably won more games than I lost, but in life I probably lost more things than I've won.
Person, sorry.
yeah, but in life I think there's a lot of things that I lose at, and now I'm pretty good at trying to figure out how to fix that, how to be in a different position, how to succeed, even if the obstacles are against me or I'm trying to fight against something. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things, is just figuring out not everything's going to be handed to you. Everything's not on butterflies and rainbows as it seems on television or in social media. So being able to figure out something when it's hard.
I think your mom would like my dad. My dad used to beat me all the time at ping pong. And then I was like, well, you never let me win. Like I was a child. He's like, someone had to teach you how to lose. So I think they're on the same wavelength there. What about you? I know we've touched on a lot. I'm sure probably still more. So what do you
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Kia and Steph on everything that's been said. And if there's anything in my experience that I can say about this generation of athletes, is that I think from a coaching perspective, like now having perspective from a youth sport lens, as well as, high elite amateur at OSBA level, it's just that the girls now are so talented, like way more talented than we ever were when we were playing. But they have a lack of direction, and they don't have necessarily as many adults telling them more of those life lessons. And hey, you need to make sure that you register for these classes, or make sure that you have this conversation with your parents. And it's advocating for themselves and teaching them the importance of having those conversations, instead of us, like he has said, just giving it to you on a platter. So those are my thoughts on this area.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then having coaches that understand what needs to be taught is huge. So I'm happy that, you have the youth in your hands so that you can help guide them in the right direction there. So then, we probably could have I can name you a million things about sport, that has been positive or has been a benefit, but then it's kind of disheartening because you'll look at the stats and you look at participation, and in that same study, 62% of Canadian girls are not participating in sport. So that means 62% are not getting all the benefits that we kind of all just talked about. And then, as we probably all know, when you look at that compared to boys, obviously have a higher rate of participation. So, and then when you look at it by age, girls drops off drastically as they get older as well. Your attention gets pulled in other places. So obviously there's not one single easy fix to this, because if not, it would already be fixed. But wondering, with all your different experience in this group, kind of what your thoughts are on the low participation, or what's a way to increase participation, especially in basketball. I know I'll start with Kia, because I was just thinking of, with Canada basketball, they just put out the Mad Love campaign with you and your teammates, and just seeing that on social, or the orange hoodies are everywhere. They're winning awards for the style you see it on all the NBA players. So wondering what you think about that in terms of as playing a role in attracting girls to start basketball.
Well, I think anytime you get representation for any league or anything in basketball from the grassroots level up, that's extremely important in order for young women to see, because you can't be something that you can't see, right? Like that's just point blank period. So for us, really, like I'm really excited about this Mad Love campaign that Canada Basketball just put out, because young women are either going to be driving in their cars in the city in Toronto, looking at billboards, and there's people that look like them on the screen and in commercials and all over their social media. So it's really having, like we've talked about earlier, those role models and that representation to see what you can possibly do. Part of it is also, I grew up in a family that my brother is an NHL player, and for his whole life they said, go be in the NHL. You can do that. Like you can make a whole living off of putting a puck in the net. For me, you can say, yeah, go be a WNBA player. That's great. But like, make sure you get your education, make sure you have all the skills that you need to get a job once you're done. Because at the end of the day, still to this day, I could not say I'm done playing basketball tomorrow or in 5 years or in 10 years and just sit down and do nothing and stay at home. I need some kind of income to survive for the rest of my life. Men don't have to do that. That's just the way that it is right now, and the way that the pay works. So that part of it is that when young women are growing up, people always say to them, yeah, go play a sport. That's fun, but enjoy it while you can. Make sure you get a job after. And so I did a thesis actually on this in school. That's what I studied, was why these young women were dropping out. And I did it in America. But it's pretty similar in the sense of once you get to that like 8th grade or like 9th grade and you're going into high school, they're starting to say to you, like, focus on school, make sure you get good grades so you can get into whatever college or university you want. Don't, be distracted by sports or boys or any of that stuff. There's also stereotypes that come along with being a female athlete, right? Like if you're going to keep pursuing it, people are going to say, well, she's this or she's that because she plays a sport. Sometimes that's not cool. So there's a lot of different numbers into what it does. And growing the sport in basketball for young women, I think starts at the grassroots level. To be able to walk in a gym when you're 6, 7, 8 years old and see a female coach is different than a young woman walking into the gym and seeing a male coach, right? Someone who doesn't really understand them, or playing in a boys league. Like that stuff, I think really plays into it. It took me a long time to be confident enough to go to 5-Star Fitness with my boyfriend and go play 5-on-5 against a bunch of guys. Like no one wanted me on my team, but it was fine. But it took me a long time, maybe till like last year, to be able to be like, yeah, I'll go play against some dudes in the gym. And so I think there's just that level of helping to grow young women. It's like you have to be able to see it, but it's got to be representation from the grassroots level.
Yeah, it's funny because you're mentioning billboards, and I mentioned this briefly before, but I live near a community center. I think you'll probably know, but it was like 2 years ago. I went out, was walking to work, and I see like, oh, your face on a mural on the side of this community center. And I was like, that is so cool. And I'm like, this court, it's next to a basketball court that's filled with men. And I was just thinking, being a young girl and being like, oh, I don't really belong on that court, apparently, it's all men. But then wait, there's somebody, at a higher level that's on a wall in front of me, in front of my face. So I thought that was super cool. So I think, even you and all the barriers you're breaking are making a huge difference for girls. So I hope, yeah, just like the Mad Love campaign, like people see it and then they're like, I can be that, I can do that, which is really cool. So Steph, your experience for youth basketball, like being on the board at Ontario Basketball, I'm sure kind of had the thought, how do we get more girls into the sport and how do we attract them? So wondering what you guys did or what ideas were thrown out kind of around that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have a lot of comments about how that came through at Basketball Ontario. I know that's constantly a mission, of course, to try and get more young girls. I think a lot can be done in collaboration, with Basketball Canada and Basketball Ontario and the NBA and WNBA. I think those collaborations have to happen. But more, I think speaking about early participation, my big belief is, if you can give young girls the muscle memory early, like if you hear Kia talk about how she started at 4. So that's something I learned really quickly when we started our programs. Originally, we started our programs at elite camps at around age 7, only when I had my own children. So, and I've been blessed with 3 sons. I've always wanted a girl too, but blessed with 3 sons. And, they were bugging me to start early. And I was like, guys, we only start at 7. And my thought process from my staff as well was like, the younger kids are harder to work with. But, being a good mom and trying to, give them what they want, I started a young 4 to 6-year-old program. And what was amazing to me was their ability to learn and gain the proper muscle memory. And it put them at an extreme advantage when they went into, grade 1 and had actual gym classes, SK, real gym classes. All of a sudden, they're being labeled as athletes. And we opened up a girls only program to do the same thing. Because imagine, you have this 4-year-old little girl, and everybody's first instinct is to put them in gymnastics and dance and very stereotypical activities. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's important to expose kids to everything. But if you want to give girls a head start at becoming excellent at our sport, starting them as early as the age of 4 to develop that muscle memory and the myelin and be able to give them those skills. So when they enter into gym class, they're already considered athletes. And that success breeds more success. And of course, who doesn't want to feel successful, right? That to me is a big barrier that we can really just knock right off the table, because if the girls feel confident with their ability to play basketball at a very young age, they are going to want to continue with that sport. When you think about how young we start our male and female hockey players, as soon as they can stand there on skates, why can't we do the same thing in our sport, right? For basketball, why can't we give them the skills that they need? Because girls typically, if they are lucky enough to find a girls only house league, it'll likely start at age 9. Think about all those years missed. And kids nowadays are so used to video games and immediate satisfaction that, for them to now feel like they're not good at something is a barrier to entry in our sport. So if parents can allow their daughters to experience basketball and, be willing to train, they'll find that their kids pick it up pretty quickly as compared to boys. We are finding, girls are very skilled very early because their attention to detail is so amazing. They really pick up the sport quickly. So yeah, my big thing is, if we can get the NBA and Ontario Basketball and Basketball Canada to invest in these younger girls only programs, that would be huge at the age of 4.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you're saying that, because even, at those ages, you might not have those self-doubts as much as, a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old. You're like, I can't do this, when I don't know how many 3-year-olds are thinking they can't do anything, right? They think they can fly. I think that's a great point that you're making. Yeah. So Aprille, I want to hear kind of your take. I know you've worked around a bunch of different programs, so wondering what you have to offer.
Yeah, I think if I take, an example from seeing the development of RBA for the last 8-9 years that I've been here. I've been blessed enough to work with the youngest age groups to the oldest age groups. And the one thing that I notice and the feedback that I keep getting is anywhere that I personally go and coach is they're like, where's Coach Aprille? Where's, right? And coaches who are like me, women who are actively in the game from a coaching lens, provide that person that they can look up to and say that they want to be like. And not to toot my own horn, but I would like to think I'm a great coach. And a lot of the feedback that I get from the girls at the high school level is, we want to go where she goes. And coaches like Alicia Tatum and Leanna Osei, those are the coaches that we need. More women coaches, first of all, to be in those positions, and more executives, and just more representation that way. Because like he has said, you can't possibly be something that you haven't seen before. And so that's sort of my take on this area here.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, if we take all these suggestions, we get the participation rates going up, and then there's the next speed bump that we always hit, which is dropping out. Like the stat everyone's heard, right? 1 in 3 girls are dropping out. So how do we get them to stay in the sport once they've tried it? It's only 1 of 10 boys that are dropping out. So the study that I mentioned before, they asked them, any girls that had dropped out of sport, what their reasoning was. And 1/3 of them had the exact same answers. They were saying low confidence, negative body image, perceived lack of skill, or they don't feel belonged, or they don't feel like they belong, or they don't feel welcome. So I think, that's kind of interesting. So Aprille, I was thinking, with our Raptors community programs, like they're co-ed. And I know Stephanie was just talking about, the power of having an all-female, which we have, some clinics that are just all female. But when it comes to our co-ed stuff, being a coach and knowing, what's causing these girls to drop out? What do you do specifically? Like, how do you talk to these girls, or how do you, show up so that you can kind of make them want to stay and fight these reasons why they're dropping out?
Yeah, I think when I think about what we see in the media, right? You have guys like LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. These are individuals who foster a sense of community, even with the rookies in the league that come through. And as a woman, when I'm at RBA, whether it's young or it's the older age group, it's taking a little bit more time to calculate, okay, this is how this girl responds. Because the thing that I admire about men is that they will just, if you say run through a wall, they'll run through a wall. Because they all think they can run through a wall, right? They all think they can dunk. They all think, and that's the greatest thing about men in the sport. But with women, it's like, how do I instill that? And how do I show them that they can with time? And when Steph mentioned it starts at the youth level, like coaching, grassroots level, it's how do we as coaches have more patience to also understand that the girl is a little different. The female mind is a little different. They need a little bit more love. They need a little bit more patience, but they also might just be intimidated by the entire atmosphere. And it's like, hey, just focus on me. Like, let's just talk. How can we improve this drill? What's your thought process right now? Why can't you do this? Okay, maybe think about it like this. And it's also understanding that everyone doesn't learn the same. And so someone might learn something really well by being yelled at, and someone might not be.
I think that's awesome. Exactly. Like, it takes patience and time, like you're saying. I remember we had in university, it was one of the men's coach come and coach us, and it's like, you can't use the same tactics. That's just not how that works, right? A lot of girls are different. Some girls will be like that. You run through a wall, they will run through a wall, but then there will be the girls that are getting yelled at, and you're like, can't you see that she's not responding to that, So it does take a coach to be intuitive and understand and patient with that girl, like you mentioned. So I think that's great. I know, Kia, you mentioned at our Raptors Coaches Open House a few months ago about like the intimidation factor. And even now, you said walking into playing in a gym, playing 5-on-5, just casually, that can be intimidating. So I'm wondering, when you were young, kind of what helped you get over that hump if you did experience that? And I know, like you mentioned, you studied the dropout rates. So I know when you build out your youth programs, probably something you consider as well.
Yeah, for me, growing up when I was younger, like that house league I started at in 4 was an all-girls league, and Hamilton Translate is an all-girls organization. So through my entire career, every year that I spent was with all of like my best friends. They're still my best friends to this day. And every year I went to Hamilton Translate camp, and it was the same thing. It's like 4-year-olds all the way through 7th grade, I believe, is like the last year that you can go to Translate camp. So you're with just like all other women, all like from different areas, different backgrounds, for an entire week, right? For like 8 days, 8 hours a day. So I think growing up, I was really fortunate to be in that situation because I didn't have to feel, intimidated by if there was a boys practice before ours, because there never was. It was always Translate had 3 blocked hours off, and there was always just, you saw your Translate family in all different age groups. So I think, growing up, and now that we have social media, because back then it was instant messenger when I was around, and mom didn't even let me go on that. I missed whole MySpace. I got to like the Facebook phase, and that's when I came into all that.
ICQ, so, you don't even know what that is, probably.
Exactly, right? So now, like, all these young women are growing up with social media like instantaneously, and they have iPhones, and it's like the little computers we have in our pockets are actually they're great because I can communicate with people from Australia back home, but at the same time, they can be so painful and so hurtful to people. And so I think one of the questions that always stuck with me that I answered to a young woman in New York was, what do you do about social media in terms of all of these people in your league or on your team are posting their highlight videos, and you don't feel like you have anything that you can put out? So how do you deal with that? And I was like, what people put on social media is what they want you to see. They'll put on their 4 baskets in the game, but they're not going to put on their 18 misses. Like, that's just, but it's a hard perception to really think about. And it's hard to like in the moment think about that. Now it's, if you look at the women that leagues promote across all female athletes, all female sports, if you look at them, their body image, the way that they're perceived by, the outside world in terms of like social media, they're usually the prettier girls that are playing sports. there's a lot of body image issues there as well, because those are the women who are getting marketing deals. Those are the ones that everybody knows, the faces of your league. So if you don't even fit into that mold, then why would you want to keep playing sports, right? That's a big part of it in high school. Like, people are going to say something about the way you look. Athletes' bodies, super different. My body drives me crazy most days, but it is what it is, and it's strong and it's beautiful and it works for me because it works in what I do. And I think that takes a lot to like understand. So I think just growing up in terms of intimidation, the more that you're around people that, you know, either feel similar to you, that you can have conversations with. We always had 2 male coaches, but we had 1 female coach, and Jillian and I could just go to her and be like, listen, Jill, this is happening. And she'd sit there and talk. And I think we all kind of had that. We would all sit before practice and just be like, this is happening at school. This is annoying, but we had that community. And I think that's where my intimidation factor didn't come in, because when I went out to go play out in the streets, I just called my friends and they would come play. And I didn't have to go hang out with the guys. I didn't have to go feel like I didn't look how I was supposed to play the sport. So there's always that. But I think it's when you have that community, that makes a big difference.
Steph, I'm sure through your years with your camps and your coaching, you've witnessed, or you've probably even helped girls who've considered dropping out, or you can sense that they're thinking of that. So I'm wondering kind of what's your approach when you see those kinds of girls, or you get signal that they might be looking to drop out?
It reminds me of my favorite book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And, you know, I think when you're dealing with females dropping out of sport, there's usually, you know, a number of factors like you mentioned, but there's usually a catalyst event that sort of is the tipping point. And, you know, I can hear about it usually from the parent. And this is where I think we can really make some big changes, because it's not just about educating coaches and female athletes. It's about educating their support system. Because, you know, when you have a parent that, you know, loves their child like all of us do, and we're here to support our kids and protect them from pain. And I know we spoke about failure a little bit earlier, and everybody's afraid about failure and what that does to our self-esteem. But I think all of us here know that the ability to bounce back from failure is what gives us strength. And if we really want to improve dropout rates, we have to dispel this myth and embrace failure and look at things like the obstacle is the way. So the way I like to help families recover from horrible situations, whether it's not enough playing time in rep or bullying. I mean, I've experienced all of those, as I'm sure everybody on this call has in some form. That is the nature of sport, but it's also the nature of life, right? So the more we can help our young athletes and their families understand that this is training for what they are going to come against in their lives, that, you know, hopefully their parents are willing and able, with coaching, to help them work through that. You know, and not every situation, you know, you want to work through if it's severe bullying, but at the same time, what I find is sharing my own experiences has been my way to keep kids in sport. And usually it's sharing it with the parent and the child, because understanding how that failure or that, you know, tribulation and trial had really impacted me as an athlete, but how it's helped me as an entrepreneur really helped give the parent confidence to keep pushing their child to keep going. And I think that is where we can serve our athletes by, you know, helping highlight, you know, some of these amazing professional athletes, but also these amazing, you know, corporate executives, Fortune 500 CEOs, entrepreneurs, showing parents that, you know, equally as important for our young male athletes. You know, I always believe that, you know, when my kids tell me they want to play in the NBA, I say, if you're willing to put in the work, anything is possible. But of course, you need to be able to do well in school to be able to get an NCAA scholarship, to be able to do what you want in your life. And basketball is a vessel to get you to where you want to go, wherever that may be, whether it's being a professional athlete for your entire life or just for a part of it, or even just playing high school, whatever it may be. The trials and tribulations that kids experience in sport should be used as a springboard to becoming more confident and stronger in their life. And if we can tweak parents and their thought process, we can really change dropout rates, both male and female.
I find that really interesting because it kind of touches on what Kia was saying, right? Like if a kid's not winning and they go to their parents and they want to, it's up to you, like you're saying, educate the parents on, don't let your kid drop out, like knowing when to push them and why is a good reason to push them to continue. Yeah. So I think that's a great angle to take. So I guess we focus on kind of some of the problems or some of the challenges facing women and girls in basketball, but I think there's also, we can point to a bunch of examples of progress that's being made in terms of opportunities maybe that didn't exist kind of before. So I'm wondering what you guys think of all your different roles and opportunities that you have, and what that says about the direction that women in the basketball world is going. I know, like Kia, you're on broadcast for one thing, like you mentioned. So I'd love to hear what your opinion on it is.
Well, I think sport has the opportunity to open up a number of different doors for you. And like Steph has alluded to a number of different times, it's doors that might not be athletic doors. They might just be you in the business industry or the medical industry, and that's okay. But sports has the ability to help open up those doors. And sometimes it's just networking, right? Sometimes it's the parents of the players that you grew up with that maybe own a company that you want to learn from. We had real estate agents, teachers, doctors, like I could call them all now and ask them questions about the industry and what's best ways to get involved and whatnot. And I think that's an easy way for you to find a door and get your foot in the door and to have a conversation, to have mentors in different worlds. And I think just in terms of sport itself, it has the ability to teach you all of these life lessons, whether you put them to use or not, that is on you. But I think nowadays, just growing up, it not only gives you something to do, it keeps you healthy, it keeps you off, the video games for 30 hours a week. It allows you to learn. I still have dinners with my friends that I met in second grade that we've played basketball all the way through together. And so there are different opportunities that are arising. I think for me personally, not to plug anything, but Key Nurse Elite, we're trying to create more opportunities for young women, in the sense of when I was growing up, you could play Team Ontario, you could play Team Canada, or you could go over to the AAU side and try and get a scholarship to the States, but you couldn't really do all three because things just, one team didn't want you playing for another team. There was just so much politics behind it. And so what we're trying to do is allow these young women to have the opportunity to play all three, to play two, to play one, whatever they want to do. But you have every single opportunity, if you want to get to the States, to be seen by coaches. If you want to play in CIS, to be seen by coaches. You have the opportunity to sit down with really great coaching staff that we've put together that have knowledge, like Aprille alluded to, that can help you with. My dad's put 2 kids through NCAA scholarships now, and he's the director of the program, right? So he can sit down with your parents and have a conversation and say, this is what the recruiting process looks like. And having coaches, I think that's big for us, is understanding that you're trying to help kids be the best that they can be. And I think a lot nowadays, especially with the NCAA and picking colleges, is people pick just because of what's on the front of the jersey, right? And then they go there and they're miserable and they don't get the great college experience that you deserve to have because you've put the work in. So it's really tailoring what's best for you and what's best for your kid, so that when you go to college, you have a great time, you have a great experience, you get a great education, probably for free. And then if you want to keep pursuing and become a better basketball player, and whether your dream is to be in the WNBA or to be on Canada Basketball's Olympic team, you have the opportunity to do that. So I think as we continue to push the barriers in women's sport and women's basketball, WNBA, it's too, with the new CBA and whatnot, people can't really say to us that we can't make a living off of basketball. We're getting closer and closer to doing it and not having to go overseas anymore. Me being able to work on broadcast has been something that's been so good, because I'm hoping that there's a young woman like me who was watching Raptors games when they were younger and looking at the TV and saying, she broke down a men's game. I think I could do that, because I only saw men on TV talking about men, right? So there's a lot of different little opportunities that I think can arise as we continue to work and continue to push, so that the next generation, our job is to leave society and the next generation a little bit better off than we inherited everything, right? And I think that's what we're continuing to do as the years go on.
Yeah, I love that. I saw the little teaser for the all-female broadcast, and I was like, oh, wow. It's just so, like you're saying, refreshing on any sport to turn on a game and hear, is that a woman's voice? You're like, this is so different from what we're used to seeing. So I love that. And then Aprille, I know you had a pretty unique experience when you got, like I mentioned before, the mentorship program with the Raptors staff in 2014. So I think even back then, it was showing some progress, and now you're working currently with some men's teams. So curious what you think your own journey says about the progress in the sport.
Yeah, I think that that was the moment, that mentorship was the moment that I realized that the NBA wasn't that far away. For me growing up, if I'm going to pick a pro player to idolize, it was actually Becky Hammon. And still to this day, I'm really hoping to have a conversation with her. But when Becky entered the league, that's when I knew that something was going to happen. And the trajectory now is amazing to see, more than three females who are coaching or who are part of executive teams, with the Raptors, 15 female executives or female members. Like that's almost unheard of and very unlike anything I've ever seen before. And so I think for me in my own journey, it's just realizing and surrounding myself with people, like creating a village and understanding that these people are the ones who are going to help raise me, and I have to either listen or I have to make an informed decision for myself. And so, Kia, was funny, as I was writing, be the best that you can be, you had said it. This is how, we're connected. And it's amazing, like, exactly. And the one thing that I will say about that phrase is anything that I've ever done in the space to get my hand in those pots, to get my foot through those doors, like I forgot about the Honey Badgers, like working behind the scenes with them from a scouting standpoint in Canada, it's just being the best that you can be, but for yourself and nobody else. And I think that's a message that I think more young females need to understand early, or just resonate with and just think like, was I my best today at practice? And if I'm not, what can I do for the next one?
Oh, that's awesome. And I think even, you're in the youth system, so they know that you work with a men's university team. Like if they were thinking of coaching, that there you go. There's an opportunity that they probably never would have thought of before. So I love that. And Steph, you're being an entrepreneur and being the president of a basketball association on the board. I think, you yourself were breaking barriers and kind of probably things, in 1999, I can't imagine you were like, oh, there's a woman that started a basketball camp that is grown to be super successful. So I'm curious kind of your thoughts on the progress and the future of women in basketball.
Yeah, it's funny. I think back to when I was in my first year of university and I was afraid to speak in public, and the fact that now I've volunteered on that amazing board. A lot of people ask me when I first joined, even just as a general board member, because it was very rare. There was only one other woman on the board for many, many years. And a lot of people ask me about that glass ceiling. And, your question to me about the future of women in sport and the future, of trying to keep women or young girls in sport for as long as possible because it helps them achieve their goals outside of it. I look at the ability to walk into an all-male board and be successful and the confidence, that had to build over time to want to take that step onto that glass ceiling. I think all of my experiences in sport led me to that point. And the only reason I was able to actually shatter that ceiling was because of my experiences through sport. And if, parents want their daughters to stomp all over the glass ceilings of the business world, this is what they need to do. They need to encourage their daughters to participate in sport. They have to start them off young, and they have to understand that, whether they, play in the WNBA or get an NCAA scholarship or just play high school or house league, it doesn't matter. Playing sport at any level will give you the experiences you need to be successful and create the life that you want, and to be able to stomp all over those ceilings with your high heels on. So, I really just think if that is what they want for their daughters, they have to be willing and educated to get through those tough, dark times that every athlete goes through. And we will see exponential growth in our sport. So I'm excited because I think, the more they see women like Kia, the more they see coaches like Aprille. And I think if we can show parents the success that corporate and entrepreneurial women have, like broadcasters, just showing these young families that everything is open to their daughters. There are no more barriers. More women will play sport.
I love that. I always say, everybody, I think, let your kid choose what sport they want to play, but highly encourage your child to play sport because it changes your life. And I think everybody on this call can probably agree to that. And thank you guys all for sharing your experiences. What comes to mind is everybody always says once we stop celebrating someone being the first woman at something, like that's when we'll know we've made it. When it's not front page news that he is doing broadcasts or April's coaching or you're an entrepreneur, that's kind of the goal, right? So I'm looking forward to a day that it's not every news article is about a woman doing something. So hopefully we're going in the right direction there. So I want to take time to thank all of you for giving me your time today and sharing your expertise. I know you're all really busy, so I really appreciate it and hope you're all staying healthy and well during this time. And Kia, good luck in your upcoming season in the WNBA.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm really excited for everything that is going to continue to happen in our world. Steph and April, you guys are incredible, so I'm so glad to have been a part of this with you.
Yeah, awesome to meet you guys.
Likewise.
Thanks, guys.